I'll begin where Rabbi Gottesman just ended, that when we're dealing with the mitzvah of Kriyas HaMegillah, the Kedushas Levi says that when the Megillah is read, it comes a Kedusha into the world and it cleans the entire world. And it has the possibility of getting rid of all Chayli and all Machla. And he's marach about it over there in his Kedushos on Purim. And he discusses Barichus the idea that the Megillah really corrects and fixes Olam Hazeh specifically, while all mitzvahs have an effect maybe on Olam Elyonim. The Megillah has a special power ibn Negeh to Olam Hazeh and to take care of all things that need to be taken care of. So we hope that by us focusing and trying to hear the Megillah correctly, we will be masliach to bring refuahs, like we just discussed, and Yeshua is the Klal Yisrael. The topic we're discussing today is the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. And while the mitzvah is Mikra Megillah, as we say, Al Mikra Megillah, most of us are mekayim the mitzvah through listening to the Bal Korah read the Megillah, and through that we're yoytze the mitzvah. With the concept known as Shoymei HaKoine, while we listen to the Megillah, we are yoytze with the Shmiya as if we would be the ones who read the Megillah. So there's two questions that we're going to deal with today. One is, how much of the Megillah do you have to hear? We all know that listening to the Megillah comes with a challenge. And that is that you need to concentrate for a long period of time to make sure that you hear all the words of the Megillah. Now, how much of the Megillah do you have to hear? Is every word, every syllable, ma'akiv to be heard? And secondly, what is the definition of hearing? That's a very difficult concept, and we'll try as much as we can see what can be considered hearing the Megillah and what's not considered hearing the Megillah. So those who participated in the Mara Mekoimis, in the Shir, when Rabbi Gottesman heard the Rashba. I'm not going to read right now the whole Rashba inside, but I'm going to begin first. The Mogen Avram brings the Rashba, which we're not going to read now every word in the Rashba, but he does read he brings the Rashba, and I'm going to focus first on the end of the Rashba, which seems to be the point that the Mogen Avram saw in the Rashba. And that is, the Mogen Avram says that in the Rashba, he says that when you listen to the Megillah, you need to hear every single word. Now, in truth, the lashon of the Rashba is, Avu b'masha nistapakto, nistapik lecho, im hishmit bo hakoire, afilu teva achas, im choizer im lav. The question seemed to be, if the koire, the one who's reading the Megillah, skips a word while he's reading the Megillah, whether he has to reread the Megillah or not, because the Lashon HaGemara is Pasuk Echad, and now it seems to be the question is Pasuk Dafka, or even a word is a problem? And on that, the Rashba says that even one word is a problem. And he brings a raya from a Yerushalmi that he understands in this Yerushalmi that the Yerushalmi is saying that if you mispronounce a word, it's not an issue. And we'll soon discuss what kind of mispronunciation is not an issue. But if you mispronounce a word, it's not an issue. But if you don't read a word, that's a problem. Now, the HaRav is bringing from this Rashba that it's not only if you don't read the word, it's if you don't hear a word. So, where does the HaRav see this in the Rashba? It would seem he sees it in the Rashba because the Rashba, when he was asked the question, does not seem in any place in the Sheila that he was asked about reading the Megillah. He was asked about hearing the Megillah. He was asked, "Hashemei atzorach lechavim b'chol teva v'teva b'shmiyasoi," and the Rashba understood that the question was, "Is there a problem if you don't hear every word?" And the Rashba never comes back to talk about the listening of the Megillah, but he talks about the reading of the Megillah. And the Magen Avraham understands that it's inferred from the Rashba that the Rashba held there was no difference between the one who reads the Megillah and the one who hears the Megillah. Because the one who hears the Megillah is simply doing Shemei HaKoinah. And if the one who reads the Megillah needs to read every word, so the one who hears the Megillah needs to hear every word in order for him to be Mekayim Shemei HaKoinah. And therefore, one would have to hear the entire Megillah, every word, just as if he would have to read the Megillah. So that seems to be how the Magen Avraham understood the Rashba, that the Rashba, even though he's talking about reading the Megillah, he meant hearing the Megillah as well. And the Rashba holds there's no difference between hearing and reading the Megillah. And therefore, he didn't answer directly the question that he was asked. And that was merumas in the question, that it means to say whether every word of the Megillah needs to be heard. And on that, the Rashba answered that every word needs to be read, which would mean that every word needs to be heard. The Magen Avraham brings some further proofs that every word of the Megillah needs to be heard. He brings a rush in Chaim that talks about the mitzvah of Birchas Kriyashma, and he says that the Rosh says, "Ani oime imashliach tzibur benachas." I don't listen. It used to be that the shliach tzibur was actually moitzi everybody with tefillah, so he would say Birchas Kriyashma, and the people would listen, and they would be yoitze with Shemei HaKoinah. And the Rosh says, I didn't listen. Why? Because ein odom yochol lechavon todir im shliach tzibur b'shtike. It's a very difficult thing for everybody to listen all the time b'shtike. And therefore, he says, he writes over there, he lost his concentration. But when one reads with his mouth, then we have no such issues, because even if he reads it without his kavanah, he still read it. So the Magen Avraham is bringing this rush that one who hears Birchas Kriyashma would seem to have to be focused at all times so that he doesn't miss words in Birchas Kriyashma. So it would seem that he needs to hear the entire thing in order for one to be yoitze. Now, it's not really our topic. We're talking about Mikra Megillah. So again, the Rashba the Magen Avraham seems to understand that the idea is that the Shmiya doesn't have to, the question, if there would be a tzad to say that Shemei HaKoinah doesn't mean hear actually every single word. You just have to get the basic idea, and with that, it's considered as if you got the entire Kriya. It means you don't need to hear every word, as long as you listen to the basic concept and you heard it from the one who read it. It's as if you read it without actually hearing every word, which is again an interesting concept. It means that you don't have to hear every word, and your actual hearing is as if you read. But when you hear it being read and you heard it for the most part, then we consider that whatever he read is considered read for you. And that the Magen Avraham is bringing a proof from the Rosh that doesn't work by Birchas Kriyashma. and he would assume that it doesn't work by Mikra Megillah as well. And then he brings on boy Beis Yosef as well, that says that even you shouldn't talk. The one who's hearing the Megillah should not talk in the middle of the Megillah, even one word, because it'll make that while he's talking, he cannot hear the Bal Korah, and therefore he will miss a word. So basically, the Mahavram tells us that there's no question that one has to hear every word of Mikra Megillah. Chai Adam then adds, Klal Kuf Nun Hey, Sif Tazayin. Now, not only do you have to hear every word, you have to hear every syllable. You have to hear every ois. If you're missing an ois, you're not yoitze the Megillah. So again, this makes it difficult. One needs to now make sure that he hears every word and he hears every ois of the Megillah. Now, we know that when we hear Pasha Zocher, it becomes a strenuous thing to everyone to hear Pasha Zocher because you may miss a word. Happens to be that many poskim hold that happens to be by Pasha Zocher. You do not have to hear every word. You only have to hear the concept. But even if you do have to hear every word, it's only a couple of sentences, only a couple of psukim, while the Megillah is a long story and it's a long kriya. But we're mechuyev to hear every word and every ois. Now, we understand from this why many poskim tell us have a Megillah, a kosher Megillah, so that we can read along, so that we make sure we get every word, we hear every word and hear every letter. But this is the shita of the Rashba, this is the shita that the Mahavram brings down. But the shita of the Rashba is not muskim. There's the shita of the Riaz, who holds that one does not have to hear the entire Megillah. He says you don't have to read the entire Megillah. He understands that one does not have to read, even the Korah does not have to read every word in the Megillah. And he basically says, "V'nira be'enai shlo yitzrichu likroi ha'oisiois ha'chaserois al peh v'im lo koron lo yotze." Right? Ele be'oisias ha'mafsiden es ha'kriya. This that the halacha is that if there's oisias missing in a Megillah, that you must read them bal peh, it's only those words and oisias that are mafsiden es hakriya. They ruin the understanding of what you're reading. And his example is, it says, V'yemei ha'purim ha'ela lo yavru. If it's missing the word loy, it would read, V'yemei ha'purim yavru. That Yemei ha'purim will pass. But that's exactly the opposite kavana of the Megillah. It's lo yavru. So if you're missing the word loy and you don't read it, you would not be yoitze. Or you can have a letter, matonis le'evyoinim, and you say matonis le'evyoinei. So you would not have levyoini, whatever, and not have the mem. So you would not know that it's plural. Two evyoinim. So therefore, that would be mafsid hakavona. You would have a mistaken understanding of what the Megillah is saying. Such words are considered ma'akev in the Kriyas HaMegillah. But barring that, a word, even if it's missing, if you can understand, and it would seem from the Riyaz, if you don't have, instead of you having Yemei HaPurim ha'ela, you have V'yemei ha'ela lo yavru. So you don't even say the word Purim, but it's understood from the context that we're talking about Purim. That would not be a problem. So you can skip technically the word Purim, as long as you don't skip a word that says a different definition. It's not a misleading and different definition of what the sentence is supposed to say. That is ma'akev, and that is something you're not yoitze. Otherwise, a person is yoitze. Again, it's all, if you have a pasuk, you don't skip a pasuk. If you skip a pasuk, that's a gemara. And if you skip a pasuk, it's a problem. But if you skip a word here and there, and you have a pasuk, and the word is not mishana the mashmos of what you're reading, then The halacha is, according to the Riyaz, one would not have to reread the Megillah, and as well, one would not have to, if he's the Sheimeya, would not be more obligated than the Koirei, and therefore wouldn't be a problem. Now, the Shulchan Aruch in Tofresh Sadik Sif Yudalit, the Shulchan Aruch tells us that this Yerushalmi that was quoted by the Rashba, the Yerushalmi happens to talk about someone who read the word Yehudim incorrectly. He could read it Yehudayim, or he would read it incorrectly in a way that it's not read correctly. The Yerushalmi says that we're not medaktik. Reading the Megillah does not mean you have to read all the words bediktu. So the Riyaz understood from this that you can miss a word. The Rashba understands you can't miss a word, but you don't have to read it correctly. Now, how far do we say that you don't have to read it correctly? So this is a subject of a machlokes. It would seem that there's 2 days in the Shulchan Aruch. One day is that any word you read incorrectly is fine as long as you read the word. Even words that would mean something else once you read them incorrectly. That means if you would read the word Yoshev instead of Yoshav, or Yoshav instead of Yoshev, so one is present and one is in the past, so it would be Meshana the Mashmos of what you're reading. Still, it would not be a problem. The second day in the Shulchan Aruch says it's a problem. If it's Meshana the Mashmos, that means it had a different definition, then it would be a problem. What's interesting is, it would seem that the first day of the Shulchan Aruch who says you can read Yoshav and Yoshev, if you would skip the word Yoshav, would be a problem. That's what's mavur from the Bir Halacha, that even the first day of the Shulchan Aruch disagrees with the Riyaz and says you have to read every word, but you could read it incorrectly. So here we have a very interesting concept. You can read a word in the Megillah. It's read incorrectly, which means that it's not understood at all. You have a mistaken understanding what the pasuk is trying to tell you, but since you don't really have to know what the Megillah is telling you, you just have to hear the Megillah. It's considered read, even if it's read with the wrong nakudos, with the wrong pronunciation, but you said every word. That's better than not saying the word. An interesting concept. It would seem that if you read it with the wrong nakudas, it would be a different word, and it's as if you didn't read it. So here, we have a very, very interesting concept. You have to hear the word. You have to hear it even incorrectly. You got to make sure you hear every word. Even if you hear it incorrectly, you may be yoitze according to one day. But if you miss a word, then it's no good. Lahalacha, the Riyaz, who's saying that you don't have to actually read the entire Megillah. So obviously the Riyaz holds that the point is to get the message of the Megillah. It would almost sound like the Riyaz maybe holds if you would read the word and it would be read incorrectly, you may not be Yoitze. But if you skip the word and you could figure out from the context what the word was saying, then maybe it'd be Yoitze the Megillah. Because according to the Riyaz, the point is to get the idea. You don't have to actually read every word. You have to know the story. You have to read the story, because that's what Pesume Nisa is, that we hear the story. Even though the actual word, you may miss a word. Here, it's not a point of reading every syllable. It would seem that those who don't hold like the Riyaz, even those shittas that hold that you can miss, and they hold you can mispronounce a word, the point is to read every word. Whether you get the idea, you don't get the idea, you read every word of the Megillah, and that's your job to do. The halacha, the Chacham Sodom, the Chai Odom sounds like he really entertains the Riyaz's Shitta to say that maybe you don't have to hear every word. But he says, since we're not Bekiyim, which words exactly would be Meshana the Mashmos, which ones would not, one should reread the Megillah. But he says you should reread the Megillah if you miss a word without a bracha. So if somebody heard the Megillah and he missed a word, so if he missed a word, he has to reread the Megillah, but he says without a bracha. The Bir Halacha sounds like he does not really accept the Riyaz's opinion. He holds that the Riyaz is la halacha, not the halacha. Most Rishonim disagree with him. And he says really that one should reread the Megillah, and it's mashma from him, even with a bracha, one should reread the Megillah. So here, again, you may, in a case where you're not 100% sure if you missed something, I would say that then you could be mitzar of the Riyaz and say that if it's not 100% that you missed it, you would not have to reread the Megillah. But here we have now, again, very, very little leeway in listening to the Megillah, because basically we need to make sure we hear every word. We need to make sure we hear every letter. We need to make sure that every letter is heard. So that takes effort and concentration. And now we're going to try to focus, which is really the main point of this year, the focus on what means concentration and what means to hear the Megillah. And for this, we need to go and first study this Rashba that is the makor, that may be a makor to this question. It's a Rashba that's really sasum. The Rashba was not very explicit what the question was, and it's not very clear in the Rashba 100% what the question was. But listen to the words of the Kushoyel in the Rashba. The Rashba is quoting him. Sha'alta, you asked, the Kriyas HaMegillah, Im tzorech hashoimeya lechavein b'chol teva v'teva, b'shmi osoi. Does the shoimeya have to pay attention b'chol teva v'teva, b'shmi osoi? That's the question. And the one who asked the question said, the nesoirarity alzeh, the thing that made me ask the question was sheshamati b'shem echod men hachachomim. I heard from a chacham that he said, shoyetoifes Megillah b'achas b'yoda. He would hold a Megillah in his hand. Fascinating. It would seem that nobody had a Megillah. There was a Chacham who had a Megillah, and it seems from the Rashba's tshuva that the Megillah probably was not kosher. It was a printed Megillah. So it wasn't even kosher. And there's a Chacham holding Megillah, and that was something that was interesting to the Shoyel. And he says, there must be some kind of thing that he's trying to accomplish with this, because what's wrong? He's just hearing the Megillah. Must be he's sorach hashoymei lechavim b'chol teva v'teva b'shmiyosei. And v'tom ani milo yotze mipi hakoirei. Is he not yotze from the one who's reading? Im ze emes v'oid. He says, midomrin on yotze ba'ashuris noshim v'amei oretz. We find that Noshim and Ameoritz could be yotzei from a Megillah of Ashuris. So how could it be that one needs to have a Megillah b'yodoi, or one needs to be mechavim b'chol teva v'teva b'shmiyosei? And the Rashba answers him. He says, you're correct. Your rayas are good. And I have another raya, says the Rashba, that if someone's walking achore beis haknesses v'shoma kol shoifer kol Megillah, im omad, it says if he stands in one place, chazaka kiven, it was a chazaka that he was mechav. And it seems perplexing. What bothered the shoyel? What was his real question? And what was the Rashba's answer to this question? It doesn't seem to be very clear. And I'm not the only one perplexed by this question. The Pri Megadim can't seem to figure out what is the Rashba's question. And the only kind of kavanah, he says, it could be, he says, it can't be, he says, that he has to understand what's going on, says the Pri Megadim. So why should he have to understand what the Megillah is saying? So the Avram said, the Pri Megadim says, I don't understand what is bothering the Rashba. What is the Shoyal's question? He says, I see here, comes up on the screen. He says, Loi havinoisi. Im loi kimish v'es chavit yesh la'ayin loma. וגם עוונס צ'וז'ה לא יבין אויסי, שכוסר שכוח מטופס מגיל לשם ולא כיוון יופן ברותיו, ומה ריים ונעז אמורס, או to כוונס הפירוש בינם? Do you then need to know what it means? And the כוונה לא says ידי חויבה, you need a כוונה to be יוצא ידי חויבה, ואם כן, אין ריים ולא יעזוס. What are they bringing proof from people that, like Azlaz means people that don't know the language? What does this mean? What is really going on? Now, I believe it's pashut that the question of the Rashba, the shoyl of the Rashba was not that you need to know Pirush Amilis. It's very, very hard to believe that that was the suffix that the person asked the Rashba. For one, we don't know the Pirush of every word in the Megillah. Achashtronim b'nei haramochim, we don't know the Pirush. So you're going to say you have to know every word except that word. Why is that word the one that punkt you don't have to know what it means? And the Rashba seems to say you need to understand kol teva v'teva at the end. So why is the Rashba not saying, hey, it has to be that you don't need any more rayas than that you don't have to know Pirush Amilas of every. And there's many other rayas from the cheshbon of the Rashba that you don't have to know Pirush Amilas. Why does it help the Chacham to hold a Megillah in his hand? Now he knows Pirush Hamilas because he has to. You say it's easier to know Pirush Hamilas when you have a Megillah in front of you than if you don't have a Megillah in front of you? Maybe. But it would be a very interesting observation that the Shoyal figured out that he's holding the Megillah to know Pirush Hamilas. If anything, he should hold something that has Pirush Hamilas. Maybe he should buy an art scroll Megillah. But why does Pirush Hamilas have to do with holding a Megillah? And if you can tell me that he held a Megillah because if you read the Megillah, you don't have to know Pirush Hamilas. But if you hear the Megillah, you need to know Pirush Hamilas. The Megillah that he was holding, the Rashba seems to say, was puzzle. There are those that say that the Nemukei or Chaim holds that you need, that was the Rashba's question. If you need to know Pirush Hamilas, I don't believe that that's the case. And we'll deal partly with the Nemukei Chaim at the end. But it's very, very hard to believe that the question over here is a question of Pirush Hamilas. So what is the Rashba's question? What is really bothering the Rashba? What's the question that has been asked, and what's the thing that the Rashba bothered to bring proofs and answer? So the Levushei Srod seems to tackle this question. The Levushei Srod says words, and I will try to give my understanding what I believe the Levushei Srod may mean. The Levushei Srod seems to say that there are three levels of hearing. That means like this. We're talking about the Rashba's Shoyl was trying to understand what is necessary for one to hear. If I, just as a Hakdama before we read his words, if the word Shmiya we know, in the Targum, many times Targum says that Shmiya is a lashon of hearing, and sometimes the word Shmiya is defined as understanding. Now, these two definitions are not far removed. And the reason being is this. Hearing is a passive act in some way. If I'm in a room and there's music playing, I'm going to hear the music because that's just what happens. My ears are open. I don't have to do anything. Sound goes in, and if you're going to define that as hearing, then I heard because I'm going to hear. So hearing could be a passive thing. Now, my question is, Mikra Megillah was meant to be a passive act. You heard the Megillah. You were in a room. The Megillah was said. You were there. You're not hard of hearing. You can hear, and you heard the Megillah. Or is hearing an active act? If hearing is to bring to Havana, it needs to be an active act. Because hearing means that it gets niklat, it gets recepted by your brain, by your heart. It gets accepted by you. And that needs active hearing. So the question is, how active does hearing have to be? How passive does hearing have to be? In order for one to be considered, he heard the Megillah. So let's read the words of the Levushis Roth, and let's see if we can figure out possibly and what he's saying. So the Levushis Roth says that Sha'alta is the beginning. He's quoting the words of the Rashba, and then he says, "Afal pisha mogavrom mitzayin al tzorich sheyichaven lotzes yedecha v'asoi." Even though the Mogan Avram is being mitzayin these words on what the Mechaber writes, tzorich sheyichaven lotzes yedecha v'asoi, which means that the koira has to be. That's not what the Mogan Avram is talking about. He's bringing a Rashba that's not talking about that subject. What is he talking about? He should be concentrating to listen to every word. That means we're talking about the concentration of the person who's hearing to concentrate on his hearing. That means this kavon, the word kavon means using your mind. You can use your mind to understand something. You could use your mind to think thoughts of being yoytze the mitzvah, and you could use your mind to pay attention that you are hearing something. What we're talking about is paying attention that you're hearing something. And here, the shoyel's question was, are you mechoyev l'shmoya kol teva v'teva? That was the lashon of the shoyel. Do you have to be mechaven l'shmoya kol teva v'teva? That means the shoyel held it shouldn't be that way. He saw actions from a chacham that made him think differently. He brings proofs. All surrounds the question: do you have to be mechaven l'shmoya kol teva v'teva? It's a concentration that's necessary in the listening of the Megillah. On that, he brings umevi raya. The ain't tzorich kol kach diktu. No, you don't have to be mechaven l'shmoya kol teva v'teva. The ameoret she'enom yoidim haloshoin, people that are ameorets that do not understand, they don't recognize lashon kodesh. If I hear Spanish and I don't understand Spanish, it's not possible for them to be mechaven kol kach. What is considered being mechaven to hear the Megillah is, since I am bending my ear, which means I'm mechaven, I'm concentrating, I'm focusing on concentrating, and I'm not thinking about other things. Mistome shoma hakol. He doesn't have to be mechaven b'teva b'bir. But if he definitely didn't hear one word, he wasn't yotz. So one can understand this Levushis Roth that there's a question over here of sfeikis. And one person who put out a sefer, Kuntris v'nishkma piskam hamelach, understands this Levushis Rod. Levushis Rod is telling us like this. We don't know if the person heard or not. So there's a person who's so concentrated that he knows for sure that he heard every single word. And then there's someone who's just listening and he's not concentrating so strong and he doesn't 100% know if he heard every word. So he's basically, it's a rule in Hilchos Fekes. The Megila, in order to hear it, you don't have to be convinced 100% that you heard every word. So if you for sure didn't hear every word, you're not Yotze. But if you're not sure, mistama, you can assume you heard every word. As long as you concentrated and didn't think machshavas acheres. Then you have a right to assume you heard every word. Very difficult to believe, to me, that that's what the Rashba is discussing. It's a din in Hilchos Fekes, and the Amiratzim don't listen so strong to make sure that they hear every word. I have a difficulty believing that that's what the Levushis Rod is saying. I believe what he's saying is that there's 3 levels of hearing. There's somebody who's, like I said, passively hearing, which means that his mind is really someplace else, consumed. He's thinking about something else totally. You know, we drive a car. We hear a shir while we're driving the car. Did we hear the shir or we didn't hear the shir? We're not going to ask that question. But most people assume they heard the shir. Are there parts of the shir that he doesn't hear? There's no question. He can't repeat many parts of the shir. Yes, multitasking is bad. Correct. But what does really multitasking mean? What multitasking really means is that one is not totally focused only on this, which means his full concentration is not here. But I want to know if someone was driving a car and listening to the Megillah, would he be Yotzei the Megillah? So again, we need to know what level of concentration does one need in order for one to hear the Megillah. So let's say I'm listening right now, I'm right now talking to someone in a conversation, and there is music. There's music going on in the room. Now, if there's music in the room while I'm talking to somebody, most probably I will not hear the music. What do you mean I won't hear it? It's there someplace. But since my mind is engrossed in something else, if it's engrossed in something else, that's not called shmir. Even though if I'll hear this music again, some will say that I already recognize it. Because we know that by default, always things are going into your mind. They even say that a child in the mother's womb hears music. They recognize it when they come out. No one's going to say that he heard music. And the reason is because when your mind is engrossed in something else, that shmir is not defined as a shmir. That's a passive shmir. Because your mind is not focused on listening. That is the level that one is not Yotze. That, it seems, everyone agrees. That's what the Levushis Rod is saying. Everyone agrees that that's not called a shmir. Then there's an opposite, extreme opposite, where the person is focusing on every word. He concentrates. Like, similarly, when you would stand by Pasha Zocher, he reads every word slowly. Zocher, you listen, you concentrate on the word Zocher. It goes into, you heard it. And you concentrate on every single word and every single word. And that full concentration means that if you would know what Zachar means, let's say you know, Zachar means to remember. When you hear the word Zachar, it goes in, since you understand the word, you understand what the person is saying to you. He's telling you, Zachar, remember. You just heard it. Eis, Asher, Asal, Lecha. Asher means what happened, Lecha, Amalek to you, Amalek. You understand it because since you understand the language, you heard the word didn't just go, it wasn't just a word that went into your ears, it got niklat in your moich and it became a havana. Like the Targum says, your shmiya right now is a havana. That would mean kol teva v'teva. Now, if you happen not to recognize the language, you do not know Taich, you don't know that achashtronim b'nei Ramacha what it means. But if you would have understood it, but you happen not to, that's not a problem. You don't have to understand what the word means. But you have to hear it in a way that if you would understand what the word means, you would get it. That's called full concentration. When my chavrusa tells me a svara, if I'm fully concentrated and I hear every word he says, I'll understand the svara that he's saying. If I don't, then I'll hear every word he said, but I won't understand what he told me because I'm not fully concentrated. And that means to hear. I don't have machshavas acheres. That means I'm not totally into something, other thoughts, but I'm like, they may call it a little spacey. Or they may even call it driving a car. That I don't really have to put my moir into driving the car. Depends at what point. If I have to make a very difficult maneuver or I have to avoid something, then I'm going to be fully focused on driving the car and I will not be considered a shemeya. But if not, even though my mind is not fully concentrated, I will be considered hearing because my mind is not into something else. So I'll hear every word. I'll hear the words. Will I be able to tell you afterwards what everything was? If you're going to ask me, was the word Balkoira, did he make a mistake when he read that word? I will not be able to tell you. Will I be able to tell you if he said the word correctly? I won't be able to tell you. Will I be able to recall if he said this word? I will not be able to recall it. But did I hear him? The answer is I heard him. So this middle level, which is a very delicate level, is the level that was asked by the Rashba whether the person is Yoitz or not. That means the Rashba was asked, does he have to hear? Kol tevo v'tevo. That means, does he have to concentrate on every word, and which means that he's focused on hearing every word, or can he listen stam? Listen stam means you're concentrating, but you're not fully devoted. You're not there 100%. And the answer is that the Rashba is saying you don't have to. And the Shoyl said, I would say you don't have to. And therefore, you don't need a Megillah in front of you. Because again, to follow Kol Teva V'Teva with full concentration, you need a Megillah in front of you. Why? And this is really what the Rashba is right. The raya of the Shoyl was Ameoritz. Someone doesn't recognize a language. It's very difficult for us to say that he's really concentrating. To him, it's all gibberish. He doesn't even know what he's listening to. So what kind of full concentration can he have? But hearing, like the Eretz Tzvi says, if you don't recognize Lashon Kodesh and you hear the word Baruch Atah, Shem Elokeinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarim, did I just say Baruch Atah? Did I say Baruch Atah? Well, it depends. If you know the language and you recognize it, you'll know he says Baruch and Atah. And if you don't, you'll think he said Baruch Atah. So if you need concentration of Kol Teva V'Teva, you need that full concentration. Amoritz, people that don't recognize the language can't do that. And therefore, such people will not be considered that they heard the Megillah. So since Amoritz, and people don't recognize the language, are still Yoitze, it means that the concentration that's needed is just that you actually know the person is saying it. You don't have to be fully concentrated. You don't have to know, even if you understand the language, you don't have to understand what you just read. I read sometimes the Gemara and my mind's a little sleepy. So I read the words of the Gemara, but it just doesn't go in. I don't understand what it's saying. But That doesn't mean I didn't read the words. Doesn't mean I didn't hear the words. If someone read me the words at that same point, it will be the same thing. My mind is not enough clear. It's not enough concentrated to understand it, but I still heard it. Levush Yisrael saying that that's the chidush of the Rajba. The Rajba is being mechadish, that one does not have to hear the Megillah in a way that he has kol teva over teva. He just has to hear the Megillah in a way that he's not fully concentrated on something else. So if your mind's fluttering a bit, if you got into a whole deep thought about something else, or you're thinking about right now eating after the Megillah about the Suda that's waiting for you, and you're fully into it, you're going to have a problem. You're not going to be hearing the Megillah. You're going to be hearing some kind of gibberish in your ear. There's going to be noise, but you're not going to hear the Megillah. To hear the Megillah, you need to be concentrating. Concentration, though, doesn't need full concentration that the person is 100% convinced that he heard every word. No, because if you're not fully focused, you won't be convinced 100% always you heard every word. But you did, because you were here and you didn't have any machshavas, so you're going to hear every word. You know why you heard every word? Because you were really concentrating, but your concentration was not full. That is the only chiddush that the Rashba is saying, that that's not necessary in order for one to be yoytz of the Megillah. Now, I would like to, I know that the Nemuki Chaim, at some point, he starts off saying that he asks on the Rashba, he asks on the Magen Avram. Where's his language? They're bringing it up. He starts off saying, "Dem shama v'loy kivin b'chol tevi yotzim ha'anu kavanosi b'alkol kivin pirush hamilus va'inyan." Right? That's how he starts off, saying that he must mean that he has to understand hamilus va'inyan. And he says, "Anti." Is that given the post the gamba chisel lechaven teva achas the kanonos anu gamba teva shema akeves pirish v'kishu advom Megillah ken gam post gechot dina ken and Megillah roiva. Because the Manmukar Chaim did not understand this Magen Avram in the beginning. He couldn't figure out what was bothering him. What things can't he, until he reaches this Levushis Roth, which he brings by Hamshach Advarim, where basically he even in this Levushis Roth, he struggles to understand what's the difference between what he does have hear, he doesn't hear. He says, is it possible that somebody doesn't have another machshava throughout the whole thing? If someone at one moment has a different machshava, but I believe that the Levushis Rod himself does not mean that he doesn't have any place another machshava. To fully never have a machshava throughout the entire Megillah process, besides the Megillah, one would need a Megillah to do that. And I think that that's good for what the Rashba is saying you don't have to have. It's not possible. The point is that when someone concentrates on something else, or his mind is totally into another machshava, that's considered that he's not listening. But if he flitters in and out, which what we call like multitask, that person still hears the Megillah. Can he recall the Megillah? He can't recall the Megillah. But that's considered he's focused. He did concentrate. He was there. He's there to pay attention to the Megillah. He's not just hearing it. He's not just hearing it. Go, passively. Such a shmiya of the Megillah would be okay. I want to just touch on 2 points, and with that, end the shir.
Wait, Rob, let me, if I can interject a question. So, what about Hilchos Talmud Torah? What level of shmiyah there? You talking to Charus and he's listening or not. Are you to Talmud Torah with the mid-level? Yes.
I would say I would think that if you're coming with Shemea Ka'oina, yes. If you're saying that it's called Hegyon Libi, no. It's not Higoyon B'Torah, but it would be like Shmiya of Torah would be like Korah B'Torah. So if it's Shemea Ka'oina, yes, you would be considered like this said, because you would be missing in Torah Shabbat Peh. It would be like Torah Shabbat.
No, let's say he's reading and learning.
You can't, if you're just listening and you don't understand what he's saying, it's not Torah Shabbat Peh, because Torah Shabbat Peh by definition means you understand.
What level of understanding?
You're not understanding it at all. Because your mind, your heart is not koileted. I read the words of the Gemara and I read not koilet what the Gemara is saying. It just is not going in. So I'm koilet the words of the Torah, and that would be Mikra Megillah, because Mikra Megillah is not about understanding the Megillah, it's about reading it, the Megillah. And if I hear that, I'm shoymei the Megillah, because I'm hearing the words. It's not a passive act, it's an active act, but it's not understanding the Megillah. I just want to point out two things. The Rosh says that you can't listen to Yoitzer and be mekayim the Birchas Yoitzer because it's very hard. People don't concentrate. So it would seem that he doesn't agree with this Rashba, because we're just saying here that how we Yoitzer the Megillah and not Yoitzer Birchas Kriyishma with Birchas Kriyishma is a lot shorter. We're not Yoitzer with Shmiya because too difficult. And when it comes to Mikra Megillah, then we're good. So the Das Torah, the Masham says that it would seem that the Marash holds you need more concentration than the Rashba needs. Because if the Rashba is saying you could, and the Rosh is saying you can't, so what's going on here? Again, I would think, someone says, this is a Baal Mechaber who says, that the Rosh holds you need to understand Pirish HaMilas. And for some reason, Birchas Yoitzer, you have to understand Pirish HaMilas in order to be Yoitzer. I don't know why that would be. But simply, the Rosh is saying is, yes, even to have the concentration of the Megillah is difficult by Birchas Yoitzer. And the reason is because you hear it every day. You're not going to listen every day that way. Eventually, your machshavas are going to go someplace else. When you have the Megillah, it's once a year. You could concentrate because it's more exciting. It's a mitzvah that comes mizman, like Chazal tell us, it's chaviva. And therefore, yes, the minimal concentration that's needed could be had. When it comes to Birchas Yoitzer, you can't do that. And the reason is because it's repetitive and again, and eventually you're going to miss it. So therefore, it's not a smart idea. Listen, you should be reading it. When it comes to Mikra Megillah, since it's something that happens once in a while, you can have easier concentration. There's a Yid who wrote us a whole piece, a shtickle saying, and that's really why I went into this sugya once. And the reason is, he said that really, if you're in shul and your mind is going all over the whole place, and you go, like they say, a vertel, it says, Mehoidu va'ad kush, sheva v'esr memei medina. So they say, a Yiddish word, that he went from Hoidu till Kush and the Tzitzis, till Bar Shama, he was already in 127 Medinas. He was already all over the whole world. So a person who has all, is Yoitzer the Megillah. As long as you're sitting in the room and you're close enough to hear, even if you didn't at all, you were totally into something else, you were Yoitzer. The Levush Esrat, he says, is not La Halacha. That's not what you need, because that's not what says in the Rashba, it's not what says in the Magen Avram. They're saying that as long as you heard, you don't have to be Mechavan Lishmoya, as long as you were in the room and you heard, you were Yoitzer the Megillah, and that's the whole entire mitzvah that you have to do. And he brings the Nemukar Chaim, and the Nemukar Chaim is Machich that. He says you can't have someone who doesn't have any machshavas, and it's Pashat, And therefore, you're yoitze the Megillah. He found a big cooler and he made everybody. And I think it's mamish something you can't say. Because that's called shmir, that's passive. It's not a maisa b'chlal. It's not called a maisa shmir. It's not called you heard at all. To hear means to do an active act. The levush rod, I believe, is correct. And it's a middle madrega of shmir that's necessary. And that is that yes, and I think that the answer to the Mukar Chaim's question is, yes, your mind could slightly flutter. But if your mind is totally into another machshava, that would be considered that you stopped listening. It was just an act, a passive act. If you're still concentrating, but in a concentration, you didn't have 1,000,000% concentration, you didn't have cold type of depth, you didn't have full focus, multitasking. If you multitasked, I believe you would be yoitze the Megillah. If you were driving your car and you weren't making a difficult maneuver, you're yoitze the Megillah, because that's enough shmir to be yoitze the Megillah. But if you're not concentrating at all, your mind is someplace totally, you were not yoitze the Megillah. We hope to hear the Megillah in its full glory, and we will hopefully be yoitze. If you have a difficulty, make sure you get yourself a Megillah. Even a Megillah in written form will help you stay focused and concentrated, and we will be yoitze and hear the entire Megillah.